Hi everyone, my name is Rebecca, and today I will be talking about ACT Practice Test number 2, numbers 31 to 40. So first for number 33, which of the following events mentioned in the passage occurred first chronologically? A. Case joined Halway and Suarez to assist them with an experiment. B. Workers from 3 Argentine ant supercolonies in different parts of the world were brought together. C. Suarez found samples of Argentine ants in the Smithsonian insect collection. Or D. Holloway and Ward were recruited by Suarez to assist with his research. Don't really know what the question is asking, but that's because I haven't started reading the passage yet. So here we go. We're going to first start reading the passage. Like many biologists, Andrew V. Suarez struggled for years with the question of which colonizing organisms fail and which succeed. He studied it the hard way, with fieldwork and lab experiments, until 1999, when he found some brown jars. He had gone to the Smithsonian Institution, National Museum of Natural History's National Insect Collection to look for early samples of Argentine ants collected in the United States or at its borders. He hoped to find out how vintage specimens of Argentine ants were related to the existing populations. So based on what we just read, it looks like Suarez found samples of the brown jars of Argentine ants in the Smithsonian Insect Collection, which exactly matches with the answer C. Suarez found samples of Argentine ants in the Smithsonian Insect Collection. Here I have also highlighted the part in the passage that shows the answer. Number 34. The main purpose of the fifth paragraph, lines 41 to 49, is to F. Explain how Argentine ants are able to survive in new areas and discuss their spread throughout the world. G. Describe possible outcomes for pioneering species and stress the improbability that the species will thrive. H. Define the concept of invasive species as it relates to ants. Or J. Compare the behaviors of Argentine ants to those of other more successful pioneering species. So in fact, I'm just going to skip the paragraphs between here. It's not really good practice, but under the time constraints of the ACT, this is what I would try to do first to see if I can do it. And if not, then I'll go back and actually read it, the rest. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, this is the fifth paragraph. When a pioneering group sets up camp and starts living in a new place, possible futures diverge. One species might be wiped out within a generation or two. A second might survive but never become common. Yet another species might thrive, eventually spreading across states, continents, and even the world. Even if surviving in a new environment is sometimes a matter of being introduced again and again, thriving is a different story. Relatively few invasive species truly prevail. And so what we've just read is that it's pretty hard to have a species thrive, even if it's an invasive species. And so it looks like the answer would be G. Describe possible outcomes for pioneering species and stress the improbability that the species will thrive. It talks about how oftentimes it will take a couple of times for the species to thrive. So right here it says relatively few invasive species truly prevail, and so this tells us that the answer will be G. Number 35. The authors claim that the Argentine ant behavior described in lines 56 to 58 is unusual based on which of the following assumptions? A. Supercolonies are common among several species of ants. B. Argentine ants in California are less aggressive than Argentine ants elsewhere. C. California's ecosystem is especially suited for Argentine ants. Or D. Ants from different colonies typically fight one another. So let's look at lines 56 to 58 and see what the answer will be. So one thing I like to do is to mark out the passage where I'm supposed to be reading. In this case, it's lines 56 to 58, and now I'm just going to read the whole paragraph to get the entire context of what I should be answering. So here we go. There's another strange thing about Argentine ants. If you take an Argentine ant from what looks like one colony and put it together with one from a distant colony, they accept each other. In fact, you can perform this trick over much of California and very few of the ants will fight. It is as though all of the Argentine ants in California are part of a few huge colonies, supercolonies they've come to be called. And so we can look back at here and see that it's asking for what is unusual based on the following assumptions. And so I concluded that it's D, ants from different colonies typically fight one another, because of the fact that this looks at the word strange for unusual, and it's unusual that the ants accept each other. They accept each other. And so we can assume that ants usually don't accept each other, and so our assumption is that ants from different colonies typically fight one another. Number 36. According to the passage, the question of which colonizing organisms fail and which succeed is one that has been studied by F. Many biologists for a number of years, G. Many biologists beginning 1999, H. The Smithsonian exclusively, or J. Suarez exclusively. So we can see that the answers look like they are from the passage, but a lot of these don't answer the questions that are posed. So we can actually go back to the passage and continue reading to see if it gives us any more information. biologist Ted Case joined forces with Holloway and Suarez for an experiment to test whether the lack of aggression among those ant colonies somehow helped them to compete with other species. Might it simply be that by not fighting with their neighbors, the Argentine ants wasted less energy on war and could spend more time on the good stuff? It turned out that yes, aggressive ants wasted energy fighting and dying, and so gathered less food and fared poorly in general. Peace pays, at least peace with one's kin, and so Argentine ants have made bank every place they have moved. In fact, it isn't just for the Argentine ant that peace seems to pay. Supercolonies and the unicolonial populations they create look to be common among invasive ants. Ants flash chemical badges identifying their home nest. Without such markers, no one knows who is friend or foe. When the clarity of us versus them breaks down, peace breaks out among colonies of an ant species. Different nests swap workers and queens, and the term colony becomes fuzzy. Experiments seem to show that one conglomeration of Argentine ants stretched the length of California, another from Italy to Portugal, until in 2009, workers from these two colonies, along with a third from Japan, were put together and they didn't fight. Thus, across the entire globe, a few peaceful supercolonies could exist and expand. So we've looked throughout the passage to see if it actually tells us when the biologists started studying ants, and it's not 1999 because this is talking about Suarez, and we know that it's not Suarez exclusively either, or the Smithsonian exclusively either, because the other biologists are from elsewhere, and there are other biologists. So it cannot be Suarez, it cannot be the Smithsonian, and they did not start in 1999. Thus, the only answer left is F. Many biologists studied the question of organisms failing and succeeding has been studied for a number of years. Number 37. The passage makes clear which of the following about the ant samples Suarez found in the Smithsonian insect collection. A. Most of the samples were of Argentine ants. B. Ward and Holloway had collected the samples as part of a larger study of U.S. insect populations. C. Suarez discovered that most of the samples were of previously undiscovered species of ants. Or D. Suarez was most interested in the samples that had been collected at eastern U.S. ports of entry. So first of all, I'm going to cancel out B as a choice, because this question is asking about Suarez finding the collections in the Smithsonian Insect Collection. So it's not B because it talks about Ward and Holloway and their involvement. So that's irrelevant. And I'm going to cancel out A and C as well because these are false statements. Most of the samples were not of Argentine ants. This passage talks about how it was rare and there were very few samples that were Argentine ants. It also doesn't talk about how most of the samples are previously undiscovered species of ants, because that's not the main point of the passage. And so we can look at answer choice D. And so how I found this was I kept on skimming the bottom to see if it would have the answer. It didn't, so I went back to the top and found in lines 16 and to 18, it says that in his mind, Suarez found far more interesting the samples of ants collected at ports of entry in the eastern United States, which is answer choice D. Number 38. According to the passage, which of the following is true of Argentine ants? F. They are stingless. G. They are physically dominant. H. They were first discovered in the United States by Suarez. J. They have failed to thrive in Japan. So first of all, we know that the ants are not aggressive. We learned about that in this paragraph, where they're not very physically aggressive. And if we go back to line 52, we can find that it says, they are small, squishy, small, stingless wimps. And so they are stingless, therefore this is the answer, and it is backed by the text as well. Number 39. The passage indicates that compared to peaceful ants, aggressive ants A. live in larger colonies, B. spend less time gathering food, C. are less likely to live in a colony, or D. are more likely to be a survivor species. And so we know that larger ants do not live in larger colonies, but they are not any less likely to live in a colony because all ants will live in a colony. They do spend less time gathering food because they are not spending all their energy into getting food, but rather they are also fighting. So this could be a possible answer. And D. are more likely to be a survivor species. No, we know this is false because we learned that the Argentine ants survive better because they are a larger colony, also because they spend more time getting food. So therefore we know that B is the answer for aggressive ants because they spend less time gathering food because they spend more time being physically aggressive. Number 40. The passage most clearly establishes which of the following facts about ants. F. In order for ant colonies to combine to form supercolonies, the colonies must have identical chemical badges. G. Ants identify their home nest by flashing chemical badges. H. Ant colonies from different species commonly swap workers and queens. Or J. The largest super colony of ants in the world stretches from Italy to Portugal. So we know that this one is not necessarily correct because there's also a mention of Japan there. We also know that F is not correct because ant colonies don't need identical chemical badges to form supercolonies. We know that from the last paragraph, it will talk about ants flashing chemical badges to identify their home nest. So we know that this will be our answer G. And of course, H is not the answer because different species will not swap workers and queens. And we know that different workers and queens from different species will not swap because the passage talks about how ant colonies are aggressive towards each other typically, and so if they are fighting, they will not swap workers and queens. So we know that it's also not H because the passage only talks about super colonies having multiple workers and bees, like being swapped, but we don't know that if different colonies will swap queens and workers. So now we can go back to number 31. The main purpose of this passage is to A. Describe events that led to the discovery of Argentine ants in the United States, B. Examine the physical differences between Argentine ants and other insects, C. Highlight the technology that scientists use to determine the size of supercolonies, or D. Discuss factors that contribute to a colonizing organism's success as an invasive species. So we know that the answer is not B or C because these are too broad to be considered, and we know that A and D are more likely to be answers. We know that this passage is not wholly talking about Argentine ants, so we can cancel out A, which leaves us with the answer of D is our answer. This passage talks about the factors that contribute to a colonizing organism's success as an invasive species. Number 32. The author makes repeated use of which of the following in order to help establish the passage's somewhat casual tone? F. Personal anecdotes. G. Idiomatic expressions. H. Humorous quotations. Or J. Self-critical asides. So first of all, I would check to see if the author is using any of the three: personal anecdotes, humorous quotations, or self-critical asides, if I don't know what the word idiomatic means. And so I'm going to check if they have personal anecdotes, which there are none. There are no humorous quotations, and there are no self-critical asides, because there's mainly a lack of quotations and parentheses, which would be for asides, or I think hyphens or dashes would also indicate asides, but there's nothing self-critical in here, so that's fine. So I guess the answer would be G, even if I don't know what idiomatic expressions mean, and just because the other three answers are incorrect. So this passage is a little different because once we finished and got to the end of the passage, we still had questions left that were not in chronological order. So it's important to remember that it's entirely possible to go back into the passage from the beginning to find the answer to future questions. Additionally, it's important to continue marking out the passage with just underlining, bracketing, and even sometimes writing a one-word summary on the side of each paragraph to remind yourself what is the paragraph talking about so we can go back and reference it later.